people with Down syndrome routinely will die about 20 years earlier than other people with learning disabilities. So you're already talking about people who are enjoying life for a much smaller amount of time. You're talking about people who have manifestations of certain medical conditions at an earlier time, which, if untreated, is going to fast track them onto a path towards an early death.
Suicide is not a choice. The word that should be respected and most frequently emphasized after suicide is prevention. The whole system, you are trained to help somebody off the bridge, metaphorically and in many cases, literally.
Welcome to the UK Medical Freedom Alliance. We are the most recognised and respected organisation campaigning for your right to informed consent, bodily autonomy and medical choice. We are the voice of ethical medicine.
I just want everybody who's watching this video and seeing our others, please like and subscribe. I know we always say this, but it really helps us. And there will be a QR code sitting at the top right-hand side of the screen where you can flash your phone at that, and that means you can buy us a coffee, or you can make monthly donations if you wish to, which would be really, really helpful. And if you're not a QR code user, you just drop down into the description and then you will see that the link is there for you.
Can I just say that if this bill went through, I think we would be getting capital punishment through the back door. The reason I say that, because there's no exemptions for prisoners at this moment in time. And and if you ask me what giving a lethal drug to a terminally ill prisoner looks like, it looks like capital punishment through the back door. That is relevant to this conversation, because if you look at the data, and Chris Whitty actually published a report, I believe pretty much at the same time as he gave evidence to the House of Lords Committee on the health of prisoners. And if you look at those statistics, disability and the rates of disability amongst prisoners is shockingly high and disproportionately high. So it is relevant to this conversation. What I need to say is, and I hope this is taken with the intent and the humility that it's meant, disabled people have not helped ourselves. If you look at the disability rights movement, it is rightly one of wanting freedoms and personalisation and the most maximal choice for the disenfranchised people of this country, of which I would say the disabled community are the most disenfranchised and underappreciated. Why does that not help in this context? Because it means that the proponents of this bill use our language against us. Why wouldn't you want the choice? Why shouldn't I give you the choice to end your own life if you want to? Because you've been telling me for decades, you just want us to respect your choice and give you options. Can I therefore just pointedly say, suicide is not a choice. Suicide is not a choice. And we do not also have a right to suicide. Suicide was decriminalized, and rightly so, but for two reasons. You can't prosecute somebody that's no longer here, tragically, because they've taken that path, but because it's also immoral and unfair to prosecute somebody who is tried and failed. We cannot, and why should we, throw the book at people who are in the most unimaginable suffering? And I do, and this is important to this conversation. The word that should be respected and most frequently emphasized after suicide is prevention. the whole system, you are trained to help somebody off the bridge, metaphorically and in many cases, literally. Oh, and that is the risk here. That every medical professional who tries to prevent bad outcomes, every medical professional that tries to put in a safeguard, that every professional that takes the rigor and time to slow down, to signpost, to procure better options against what is a dysfunctional, broken and blocked system, that what they are being told is that they are blocking what an individual wants. And to that regard, the Mental Capacity Act, which is the bedrock, it is as of now what underpins this bill, the Terminally Ill Adults Bill. That doesn't help us either, because it says one of the core tenets of the Mental Capacity Act is this: that we all have the right to do ourselves harm and make unwise decisions. Indeed, many people make unwise decisions when they go out partying on a Friday and a Saturday night, and they socialise with their friends, and they regret it the morning after. But it was not designed when that, for the circumstances whereby that unwise decision is irreversible. And the problem here is, if I may say another thing connected to this, you would never be able to put this through a medical trial, a clinical trial, because you have to observe. There has to be an afterward. There has to be an after the trial. You have to say, oh, how did the drug affect you? Oh, kind of what changes would you make? Science is a trial and error. You have to be there afterwards so you can reflect on the mistakes of the experiment. There won't be an afterwards. The only thing afterwards is a funeral and a eulogy. And is the doctor and is the coroner going to stand up there and give the eulogy and say, this whole thing was a darn mistake?
And of course, the coroner won't be involved, George.
Well, exactly. But they should be, shouldn't they? Because suicides are unconsidered, unnatural deaths that you investigate. Now, when on this beautiful earth was giving somebody poison, because it's not actually medicine, because medicine isn't meant to or designed to kill, it's meant to alleviate pain. So legally, I don't know how that works, but I'll leave that to the pharmaceuticals. But at what point was a death of that circumstance not falling under the bracket of an unnatural death? And connected to that, Amanda, this is the point that really scares me. Because what they are doing is creating another supply chain. And you're having to change everything about how this medicine, if you call it medicine, this more actually poison, reaches the hands of the patient. So we're going to have to create new drugs, store new drugs, safely. We're going to have to create new standards of training. At the end of it is a very, 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 as I say, vulnerable person.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I just want to very quickly talk about autonomy and choice. Now, this is something that you very insightfully, Ken, in your evidence to the committee, exposed the flawed assumptions on which decision-making particularly for people with Down syndrome and learning disabilities are made. What does the bill misunderstand about genuine autonomy?
Yeah. So again, this goes back to the training point, and people with Down syndrome and obviously people with learning disabilities, they're all individuals. So there's a a generic trait that you can attribute to most people with Down syndrome in how their brains process information, and that knowledge, although it's been around for about 3 decades, isn't widely known within the medical profession. So, for example, if you go with a leading question, like imagine if you're a salesman, you go with the leading question, the question that you know will get the answer you want. That in itself can create a problem because you've automatically, secured the answer, and the person may not have had an informed choice. Someone with Down syndrome in particular could be trying to tell you about something they were thinking about, or something they'd heard someone else talking about, or they could be talking about something completely different. So people with Down syndrome quite often can go into what's called like a sort of a tunnel view of conversation. And whatever you're trying to introduce in the conversation at that time, it could just be just not on their radar to understand it. If you walk in wearing a medical uniform, someone with Down syndrome can immediately recognize you as someone who has authority. And by having that authority, they should maybe acquiesce to whatever they think you want to hear, because actually they're very sociable and they want to try and create a conversation. They may not understand the fatality of the conversation they're having. So one of the things which we'd suggested was, because we're so aware, and I've been able to triage things which have been on CCTV where people have assumed one outcome, and even without seeing the CCTV, but just having it described to me, I can triage what the actual purpose of that was. So we said, if a video was taken all the time at all stages, perhaps we could be more comfortable that someone hadn't inadvertently seeded a view in an individual's mind. And this was something which was resisted quite heavily. And again, it was down to, it's maybe more about dignity and privacy. And we said, well, it's using the criminal justice system. So we're talking about something that's generally more fatal and final than a police officer's interview. So why couldn't we have every single interaction video recorded so that we can see the nuances, we can see the body language, we can see someone in distress trying to, desperately communicate in another way, but because of the lack of understanding to the audience or by the audience, they're still thinking, well, I've got a job to do, I've got a tick list to go through, I'm going to work for it, and we'll get to the answer in the end. So this is a real and genuine fear of ours. I could ask my son who has Down syndrome, any question, and he could easily say yes or no very quickly. And then 20 minutes later, the next day, he could come back with a more refined answer because he's thought about it, because it's not to say he didn't understand the question, but he didn't necessarily understand the way to communicate an answer, or potentially, how wide the answer should be. And when you're faced with, as we were during COVID, and we saw people with Down syndrome being refused advocates to try and communicate on their behalf because of the various rules allowing more than one person into bed, we then saw a rise of people with Down syndrome consenting to do not resuscitate notices, with no evidence to show that they understood it, and a genuine fear of the rest of us that this was a pretty terrible outcome. When we saw that people with Down syndrome were also the only group mandated, pretty much as far as I'm aware, to receive antiviral treatment if they had COVID, then we saw that treatment being routinely withheld or run deliberately out of time so that the treatment wouldn't have an effect, because someone was deciding, actually, we've got a limited stock, let's decide who we're giving it to. And again, they were trying to triage people over the phone. So they weren't even saying, come into, I don't know if any of you had to go into some of the units that were sort of run like hazmat things. It was quite a serious event if you went into hospital. But generally, with people with Down syndrome, it was done over the phone, and it wasn't done by the individual. Usually, it was normally done by someone advocating for them, and you just were timed out. So the knowledge about how to communicate and the subtle pressures that people with Down syndrome could feel in their desperation to be included and to communicate and be part of the conversation could be completely misunderstood. And a point I was going to make earlier around the Mental Capacity Act was the reason the bill sponsors thought that people with Down syndrome would be disapplied is because they thought under the Mental Capacity Act they'd be classed as having a severe mental capacity and severe mental disability. And under the NHS's own definitions, I think I found 23 different references and not one of them was severe. So it actually brought people with Down syndrome, every single person, into the scope of the bill, which, again, when you get into the nuts and bolts of what was the intention of the bill sponsors, well, if that wasn't the intention and it wasn't the intention for people with Down syndrome, how many other groups should have been excluded from the scope of their bill because of their views around understanding and disability and learning disability. Okay. But actually, the law doesn't support that.
With heartfelt thanks to Ken and to George, to Amanda and Liz, I'm just bowled over by the content of what you've just seen. That's 20 minutes of a conversation that actually went on for well over an hour. The other 40 minutes or so is available in 2 separate chunks. Please dig them out and have a look. Go to our YouTube or our Substack and you can find the videos, or go on audio to Spotify on Apple and you can watch it there. Please, you've got to see the whole thing. It's so important, and many people just do not realize the ramifications of the terminally ill bill.